Welcome to Wadsworth History on Film, a program presented by the Wadsworth Area Historical Society and designed to record the oral history of Wadsworth for posterity. I'm Cesar Carino, your host, and our guest today is Tom Fixler. Tom, you've been in Wadsworth for, well, all of your life, and your family was here even before you got here. Is that right?
Well, that's correct. I think it goes back to about 1848 when my...
1848, that's 150 years ago almost.
Had, two brothers came in this area. One of them settled north on the Fixler Road area, and then one of them settled southwest of town on a farm.
Where southwest of town, Tom?
Oh, Harpster Road.
Harpster Road.
Yep, Harpster Road.
And those names were what?
The names were Fixler.
I mean the first names.
You got me, Cesar. I'm sorry. I can't help you.
You weren't here.
No, I wasn't here at that
time. Well, before we find out more about your relatives and your ancestry and so forth, how about starting with 1920, what, 1 or 2, somewhere along?
I was born.
And what year?
1921, November.
November of 21,
26.
so you'll be 76 years old pretty soon.
November,
this
right.
November. And what day in November? So we have that for
26th.
History. The 26th of November. And you were born where in Wadsworth?
Well, I think that I was born in, well, I know at the corner of College Street and West Street. My dad and my grandfather had built a home there, and that was our home site then.
You were probably born in the house, too, weren't you?
I wouldn't be surprised. I think so.
Because the first people born in Wadsworth in the hospital were Harriet Crawford and Bob Clapper.
And that would have been what year?
1921.
21. So I was close.
Very early.
Might have been
right.
close.
You could have been born in the hospital. It's entirely possible.
Mm-hmm.
Tom, who were your mom and dad?
Well, my mother was came from the Hamilton family. I don't remember that. Would recall the Hamilton coal mines up around Clark's Corners. That was my
there was a Happy
uncle.
Hamilton.
Happy was a cousin of my mother, and Happy is since dead. He died
Happy
in
died
Florida.
long ago.
Yeah.
Happy was working with Henry Coal and Ice for a while.
Yeah,
and Happy then also was a custodian at a centralized school in the 30s and 40s.
And then he bought the old City Coal and Ice there on Broad.
He bought the City Coal and Ice and Broad.
Worked from there.
That's right.
And we sold that when he retired, and he went on to Florida.
He went on to Florida, and that was your mother's a Hamilton. So she's from Wadsworth as well.
Mm-hmm.
And how many generations is your mother?
Well, I would be guessing on that, Cesar, but as I say, going back to the old coal mine areas, and that was probably in the what?
Well, the
15,
late 80s, or the middle to late 80s.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they pretty well started closing down at the latter part of the 80s and the early part of the 1900s. We still had some, but not too many of them.
And I remember getting coal up there. Dad had built a trailer, and we used to go up there and get coal for our house years back.
And that was north of town.
That was north, and then the old Williams mine up there.
The Williams mine and Silver Creek. By Silver Creek and Broad Street now.
Mm-hmm.
Tom, who was your mother then? Her first name was what for history?
My mother's name was Leota.
Leota.
And she married my grandfather, whose name was Pollock, and he was a carpenter here in town.
He married your grandfather?
Yeah, well, yeah. No, I'm sorry, confused. My mother's father was a Pollock. Okay,
right.
All right.
And then
she married my father,
who was
Clyde Fixler.
Clyde Fixler,
Now
right.
we got it. Okay.
Got this straight here. your mother married your grandfather, but those.
Well, that happens.
That does happen. We had a person,
right.
a friend of ours, and this is one of the strangest stories I've ever heard, where a man married a girl, and his mother-in-law lived close by. He divorced his wife and married his mother-in-law.
Okay.
But your mother married your father.
That's true. That's true. Now I'm the result of that.
You're one
the
of
only
one. The only one. You're the only one from that marriage.
Right.
Who are your cousins? What Fixlers are your cousins here in Wadsworth? I mean, from the other families.
Well, there's Joanne, lives up on Roslyn.
Joanne Highcoop.
Joanne Highcoop. Her mother was Doris Kreider and ran the old hotel. Mm-hmm. Most of the cousins are pretty well gone. I mean, there's not too many of us left anymore.
Mm-hmm. They're at one time we had a lot of Fixlers around.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now they, one way or another, were associated with real estate, right?
Pretty much. My dad started, well, the old farms way back, that's most of the people in this area were farmers.
Didn't we have a Fixler at one time who worked at Allen Hartzell?
That was my dad.
Your father worked at Allen Hartzell.
That was my dad, yeah. He worked there, and then when I got out of the service in '46, I went into, well, I started a small building company, and Dad sold my houses that I built. And from that point on, then he said, well, let's start our own company. So in 1948, we incorporated together, he and I.
And you have Fixler Agency.
Fixers in 48.
And we're going to get to the
right.
Fixler Agency because there's a lot to tell. I still remember the words that Dana Kreider used. He has the largest lawn in Medina County because he probably has planted every lawn in this area. And you very well might be one of the largest, shall we say, builders in Medina County. And
Well, probably earlier. I would say not now because
Well,
you're getting
yeah.
a lot of large builders moving in and so
but
forth.
at one time, you were one of the
Yeah.
progenitors of it. Tom, tell us a little bit about your early childhood down on College and West, and who was there, who were your neighbors, and where did you go to school, and all of those kinds of things.
Well, College in West, I can remember when, as a little fella, they had the college out there where Isham School is.
Do you remember the college?
I remember somewhat of it because my mother at that time and my dad took in school teachers. And they'd rent rooms to the school teachers, and I can remember they became great friends. And as a young kid, we used to travel back and forth to some of these earlier school teachers. They became close friends.
Well, surely they lived there, and
Yeah.
they became part of the family.
So that was part of that. And my grandfather then lived across the street on College.
He lived across the street from you.
Yeah.
Who were some of your other neighbors? Grandpa lived across the street. Who were your neighbors to the east and to the west?
Boy. Sinclair's.
Sinclair's, right?
Is that a name you
Yes,
call
right,
that?
right,
Okay,
absolutely.
Sinclair's. Doris Geisinger?
Which Geisinger?
Oh, wait, Doris Gonzalez, I'm sorry.
Gonzalez, right.
Gonzalez, yeah,
Yeah.
they lived up north there on
Right.
College Street.
Gonzalez, right. They had a couple of kids, and they left Wadsworth some years ago.
Yeah.
But they were
Well,
around.
Doris lived on Westgate.
Oh, did she?
Yeah, Doris lived
Doris
on
lived on Westgate.
And then Kreiders,
And the Kreiders.
here across the street from
Which
us.
Kreider was that one now? That was the...
That would have been
Doris.
Norm Kreider.
And Doris Kreider?
No, that wouldn't have been related.
No, not that Kreider.
No, that was a different Kreider. That was Norm Kreider, and Doris. Then they lived. Well, of course, they always lived up here by the hotel. They had that home.
And how about Marilyn Kreider?
Marilyn Kreider.
She lived across from Isham School.
That doesn't
at
ring
one
a bell.
time.
That doesn't ring a bell, Susan.
Now, when you went when you went to elementary school, you were probably farther away from the elementary school that you attended than you were to Isham School or Centralized School because you're only a block away there, but you weren't permitted to go there. Why not?
Why I wasn't permitted to go to Isham
Right.
School? I don't know. Was it really a school then, or was it a grade school at that time?
It was a school.
Because I
Indeed, it
went to
was.
Lincoln.
Yes, you went to Lincoln, and the reason that you didn't go to Isham is that it was a township school.
Well, that's true. Yeah,
Yes.
that was the country
Towns-
kids.
The country kids went there.
That's right.
and,
So I went to Lincoln.
And you had to go to Lincoln. So
And the old story, there weren't school buses. So
No.
the old business, and I tell my kids, and I suppose you have too, I used to walk
Of course
to
you did.
Lincoln for lunch and come back.
That's right, and that's a mile, isn't it?
Exactly.
A mile.
I think it's a mile.
Whereas if you could have gone to Centralized, you would have been able to go one
Couple
block
blocks
and you
away,
would have,
right.
you would have been there. Now, we're trying to establish all of the teachers who taught in Wadsworth, and one person can remember some teachers and another person can remember some other teachers. Whom do you remember as your teachers at Lincoln School?
And of course, Owen Work primarily. He was an exceptionally
Who was that?
Owen J. Work.
Oh, yes, but
Yeah.
he was not,
He taught a couple of classes. I think he taught
Did
some
he really?
math. I think he did. I think
in
he
the
taught-
elementary schools.
I think he did.
For heaven's sakes, he did
And,
everything then.
Frank Close was very good.
Yes.
Frank Close taught psychology, salesmanship. Glenna Durr was one. I
Yes.
remember Glenna because on occasion she would lean me across the desk and she had a paddle about
Oh,
so
well, that
big.
was a tough one, but she's a
this
sweetheart.
Oh, she was one of my
We're-
favorites.
Everyone's favorite. We're having her nephew as one of our presenters pretty soon. Kenny Durr.
Yeah.
She was his aunt. And Glenna died many years ago, and just a wonderful person. She married a person by the name of Lobenthal.
Yeah.
So she became Glenna Lobenthal. And whom else did you remember from there?
No. Chester Hawk.
Chester Hawk. Yes.
Is that a name
His
you
name,
remember?
yes, his name has come up.
He was in in Lincoln, grade
That's
school
right.
in Lincoln. Mary, what was his name? I used to play a lot of golf with him. Down at the city light and water department, ran that for years, and his wife, Mary, can't think of her last name right now.
You mean Blau, do you?
Yeah.
Blau.
Yeah.
Oh, yes,
yeah,
Mary
okay.
Blau, right.
Yeah, Mary Blau. She was
Mary
a
Blau.
good teacher.
Now, when you walked up when you walked up College Street to go to Lincoln School, you had to walk. Of course, with the cemetery, there was never any business there except what was always there. The first business you would run into would be Venner's Memorial, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Then go up the street and tell us what you found, what you remember. Was on the corner of North Pardee, and because we don't want you to, as you're a young kid, we don't want you crossing the street, so we're going to take only the north side. What was on the corner of North Pardee and College Street at that time?
Well, there was an old house now, which has since been torn down, which Manning has his office in. The church was still there. The other side was, the building is still there, but that was the East Ohio Gas.
East Ohio Gas Company, that's
I
right, for
recall
years
that.
and years.
And
then the gas station on the other side.
Yeah, it was Nicodemus's gas station.
Right.
And going up the street was pretty much the same. Bob All had a grocery store in there.
But he didn't do that until after the 40s.
Until after the war.
Right. And what about the Wadsworth Furniture Company? Do you remember that?
Yeah, there was the Card Dibble owned that, the old furniture building, that old yellow brick building.
Card, not Clark, but Card.
Card Dibble. He was one of the owners of Allen, Hartzell, and Dibble.
Right, and it's Card. And then what was his real name? Do you know? It was
anything but Card.
Well, he had it seems to me that it was a Latin name, and we'll get someone to call us tonight, I'm sure.
To clarify that.
To clarify that. I get calls every single night, and boy, that's great, because we can correct these things. That's what this is for.
Card was always that anyone ever knew him as, and he was a nice guy.
Oh, a wonderful person. Then right next door to Card Dibble was what? The little gas station, wasn't it? Right.
Well, no, you're next door to Card Dibble. Card Dibble was in the Allen Hartzell.
No, I mean not the building, the Wadsworth Furniture Building.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it would have been, I suppose, Don Merriman stuff then.
Well, Don Merriman. Then there's a little gas station too.
Before that, yeah.
And then Bender's Restaurant.
Old Bender's Restaurant.
And then, of course, Wright's Department Store. But what was it when you were growing up?
Oh, Lord Caesar, I don't recall.
Probably it was at that time still was Wright Department Store.
They had the old Wright store on the corner where Ackworth office is. Tubasing had a store down there. The
Later
old
on.
Citizens Bank, that was pretty much the same.
Then you crossed the street and you went to Brenny's, right?
Bob Hood had a bicycle shop.
Ah,
remember Bob Hood?
That's right, yes. And where was that?
That would have been just west of the old Citizens Bank building.
Bob Hood.
Bob Hood, Walter Hood.
Walter
You
Hood.
probably remember Walter.
Yes, I do.
Walter was a classmate of mine.
Yes, Walter Hood. And they had that was on the other side of the street.
That would have been the west side,
And
the south side.
The south side. There was a Kroger store over there, too, at that time.
Right, there was a Kroger.
And the A&P store.
And a fellow by the name of Nipper, I think, ran the Kroger store.
Nipper, he lived on...
Oh, was that A&P?
The A&P, Nipper ran the A&P.
And that was on the south
and
side.
then he lived out in Western Star. The house on the closer to the street. He lived there later on. The person who built that house was Austin B. Simmons.
Yep, we sold that for him.
You sold that for him?
We sold that for
No
that
kidding. Now, as you walked again, now you're still walking toward the school, and you're walking on the sidewalk. You're not going to cut through any lawns because you're not allowed to do that. You know that. Very well. Your mom told you don't walk. You walk on the sidewalks. Walk where you can be seen. Let's go to Brenny's, and immediately following Brenny's was what? Was that the bakery or the barber
There's
shop?
a little grocery store in there.
Little grocery store, not the bakery. George the baker.
Seemed to me there was a grocery store, and what was her name that ran that? Used to have racehorses.
Oh, really?
Yeah, used to have.
Well, if you think of that, we'll come back and get
Yeah,
it.
because I can't recall right now, but.
And then a barber shop.
Yeah.
And then.
I think it wasn't, the bakery still was there. Has the bakery been there this time? All?
Yeah, the bakery was there in the early 20s and early 30s.
And the old telephone office.
Wasn't that up on High Street though?
Yeah, that's going up high.
Street, yeah.
Yeah, that's the way I went to school.
Oh, you went to school.
I used to go up
Okay,
that way.
all right,
I'd go up
okay.
High Street and cut back through.
I
I never went clear up by the library, the old library. And go up
Okay, well
Lyman.
then
I know what
you
you're
did what your
thinking of.
mother told you not to do. You
Yeah,
walked
probably.
So as then you let's walk up High Street. What did you remember there?
Well, basically the church and this type of thing.
And
I
then
don't
you-
recall a lot of Doc Worstler's federal office was in there.
That's old Doc
Dr.
Worstler's.
Johnson's office was where the old Johnson house
Right.
is now.
And then did you go up one more block and over, or did you?
Probably. Those are things you don't think about as
That's
a
right.
kid.
Now
You
then-
scrambled around to get up to school, probably a long way.
As you were standing on the corner of Maple and High Street, and you looked over to the left, where Fixler Agency is right now, what was there?
I don't recall other than prior to the time we bought it. When we bought it, it was an old two-family
House, right.
I think, though, I've been told that at one time, or at least the lot was where that carriage house was. That, together with the car wash, I think was part of the carriage factory. But I think our building must have been either razed and then rebuilt or something, because some of the structure of our building wouldn't have gone that far back.
Now, Tom, did you ever think to yourself, I'm going to have a very prolific agency in that house when you were walking up the street?
No.
Never thought of that?
No.
Probably thought that
No,
you
you're thinking about when you're going to play ball that
That's
night or when
right.
school's out or
That's
something
right.
of that nature.
And you probably thought, well, I'll be going to the mat shop and working or something like that. And
No,
that's
I never had projected
you
anything
never
that
projected
far.
anything that far in advance. Then you walked to Lincoln School, and then you went to the junior high school, or at that time it was the elementary, junior high, and high school. Some of the teachers you remember in the junior high school.
In the junior high, I must have went through pretty fast.
Well, you're very bright. You didn't linger too long in any of those.
Well,
those
I
classes.
really don't come to.
How about the high school? Do you remember any of those people?
Well, Gift, he was a
Yes.
good teacher.
What was his first
Hall, wasn't it Wayne?
Wayne Gift,
Wayne
right.
Gift, and then was it Frank Hall? Taught science. Tall, good-looking guy.
Hall?
Very tall, very nice, slender, nicely built man.
Hall, I don't remember.
Yeah, he was there, and of course, as I relate closely to Frank Close because I worked at the Rexall drugstore, and Frank was one of my frequent customers.
And tell us something that Frank Close was somewhat addicted to.
He was Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola. He was almost
Frank
addicted
Close
to it.
and Dick Huntsberger and a couple of others. They made the rounds. See, I worked at the Rexall drugstore, and Bob Brown worked at Brenneman's drugstore, and I think, forget who worked over, I think Bill Cruz worked at the old Standard Drug.
Standard Drug across the street from
So Frank and Willer and Dick Huntsberg would make the rounds. They'd come in and they'd chat with all the fellas, 'cause it was kind of a hangout place, and they'd have their Coke, and then they'd go over to Brenny's and have a Coca-Cola there, and then over to the Standard Drug. They made those rounds.
How much did the Coke cost of those days?
Lord nickel, I suppose.
Nickel, right? And it was a big one. You put a little syrup in and stir it up.
Yeah,
and
we'd make them. It's all fountain Coke then. You know.
that's all there was. Now, you went to high school, and you graduated from high school in 1939.
39, right.
What was happening in the world in 1939 that really caused you some problems?
In 39? I don't, not a whole lot. I mean, I went on to college at Fenn College in Cleveland, and then from that point, I worked at the B&W and then enlisted in the Coast Guard in January of 42, right after.
42, right after the war
It was called up,
started.
I think, in March or something. It was gone for 4 years. So that 4-year period, as far as Wadsworth is concerned, I suppose I draw a blank. I wasn't around.
Wasn't around. You were elsewhere. And you went to, what were you studying in Fenn College?
Business administration.
Business administration. And you wanted to do that all of your life, probably?
Probably not.
No,
See,
probably not.
All of these things are, you just
did
flow into it, you know.
You just flow into it. We'll go with the flow.
I think the main thing that I learned in college, and I've told people this, was accounting and typing.
Those
The
two.
rest of these things, I think, were
Now, Fenn
secondary.
College is no longer in existence.
It's Cleveland State now.
Cleveland State, part of Cleveland State University, right. But Fenn College was a very good college at that time. A very good college. And where was it located? Right downtown?
Corner of Euclid and 21st Street, Fenn
Right.
Tower.
Right, which is right
I still
down.
remember my room 1211.
1211. And you
And then it was
lived there.
affiliated with the YMCA quite a bit. I think they used some of the YMCA buildings, this sort of thing, because I know we had classes in various parts.
What was Cleveland like at the time?
Cleveland was nice,
You would-
really good. We'd go from, I know the guys, and we'd maybe walk downtown to the old Forum restaurant for dinner, and you felt you could go anywhere and everywhere.
And no
which was
problems
true.
at all.
Yeah,
This was in the
same thing when I
40s,
was in
39,
New York
40.
City, the same thing during the war.
You can't do that today, of course.
Oh, no.
Coast Guard. Tell us about the Coast Guard, where you were and what you did in the Coast Guard.
Well, in the Coast Guard, I went in and enlisted in January of '42. They called me in, I think it was March. Spent a lot of time, I spent some local time in the Great Lakes. I enjoyed that quite a bit. Well, I didn't at the time, but looking back, I think I enjoyed it because I was on the freighters and the Coast Guard boats. Went to New York for training, bosun mate training, did pass that. Was on my way to Camp Lejeune. There was 10 of us. We were supposed to be training for landing barge duty. For some reason or other, 2 of us, myself included, our orders changed. And we were transferred in wonderful duty. We went transferred to Pearl Harbor. And we had a great duty. We had our own barracks, and we had our own private section. And
This was after,
during the war, yeah, during the war.
but it was after, however, the bombing.
Pardon?
After the bombing.
Oh yes, yeah, that was what had caused the Coast Guard to get involved over there. There had apparently been, and I guess since it's come out in history, there had been an accidental explosion in Pearl Harbor, and a number of ships were destroyed and lost and so forth due to handling explosives, and so that was how the Coast Guard got into it. We went in on an explosive loading detail. In other words, we supervised loading of LSTs, bombs, this type of thing. We had to oversee.
And what are LSTs?
LST is a huge landing barge, probably
Okay.
300 feet long, flat-bottomed.
What does LST stand for?
Landing ship. Transport, I suppose.
Transport?
I've kind of
Okay, that's
forgotten
close
that.
enough.
Yeah,
But
I forgot that.
just so we know it's not a bomb, it's a ship instead.
No, it was a big flat landing barge with the deck, the forward deck. You drop down a gate. You could drive trucks, jeeps, and so forth in there.
On that. And how long were you then in Pearl Harbor?
Well, pretty close to 2 years, I guess.
So then,
And the war ended when I was in Pearl Harbor.
and you then came back to Ohio. Now is where we start Fixler agencies.
Close.
Tell us about the very first kinds of experiences that you had the Fixler agency, because it has been a really meteoric climb since then. But at the very beginning, I suspect that you had the same kinds of problems that everyone else had, or has.
Still have.
You still have when you start business. But what were some of the problems? What was happening? I mean, were houses easy to get to sell? Could you get money? I mean, this is right after the war. Things had not been normal for 15 years because we had the Depression, then we had the war.
Well, I think the biggest problem at that time, and you made a point there, is getting the money for purchasers. Okay, so my dad was pretty good. He was a good entrepreneur. He went over to Akron Savings and Loan at that time, sat in with them over there and said, well, listen, fellas, if we bring you loans, would you entertain them? And well, at that point, they were just at where they wanted to expand.
Of course
So
they
said,
did.
Sure. Okay, bring them over. So we did. We started bringing our loans over there at that time, and I remember they would pay us a finder's fee. If we would bring them a loan, they would pay us $25.
A full $25.
Full $25 for every loan that we brought. Well, Dad, we brought in a number of them, and there's no question about that. And when Dad would go over to close those loans, he'd come back. He was so tickled because he'd come back, and each individual check was $25 for every loan that we made. So he was pretty thrilled about that. So anyway,
Now, $25 was a lot of money at that time.
You bet it was.
Yeah.
You bet.
I bet it would be. I bet it would be equivalent to a $250 right now, 10 times the amount, don't you think?
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that progressed real well. We developed a good relationship with Akron Savings Loan to the point that they opened a branch at our office. And at that time, we serviced loans for them here and made savings deposits and handled it as a regular branch office.
If my recollection is correct, that was the first time that an Akron firm, a financial firm, had come into Wadsworth.
You're
Is that
right.
correct?
You're right.
Tell us about that transaction. I think that is so historically important for us to know, because it was the very first time, because at that time they didn't go across county lines.
No, that's true.
How did this happen?
Well, I think it was just a case of growth, really. We had probably provided somewhere in the neighborhood of, I'm guessing now, but I would say $5 to $7 million worth of loans in this area.
Wow.
That had to be serviced. So that was their thinking of going in and then appointing us as a branch office, which we did. So we serviced those loans, as well as, I think at that time we had around $3 million in savings that people had started. So it got to the point where it was quite large to the point where we were doing most of that. We were getting secondary, our real estate insurance business was secondary.
And you weren't particularly advertising that at all. You didn't start out that way at all.
No, just going to get loans, because we had to, earlier when you're talking about money shortage, we would go to local people that we knew had some funds that liked to put their money out on personal loans. In fact, one, I don't know whether you like, Highland Hoagland. I don't remember Hoagland.
Surely. Dead now, of course.
Dead now. We would go to him and we'd say, gosh, we got a good little sale here and this fellow needs $4,000 or $5,000. And he'd look at us, he'd say, they look good to you? And we'd say, yep. He'd say, okay. That was the way we made our loans then. No credit reports,
nothing at all.
Nothing of that
I can remember going
into
into a store one time in Akron. I forgot exactly where it was. And the man came up and I wanted to buy something. And the young clerk was there as well. And the clerk was saying, may I see your credit card, please? Well, I showed him a credit card or gas card or something. And then it said, may I see your driver's license? Show my driver's license. Surprised he didn't ask me for my wedding license, you know. The manager came out and said, you know, son, let me tell you something. He was an older man. All of that you just got done doing is not going to be worth a good darn. That's not what he said, but he says, look him in the eye, and you can tell whether he's honest or not. This man's honest. Give him what he wants. And that we did that in Wadsworth.
You sure did.
I built a garage one time right after I was married. Leonard Wright built the garage for me. I said, Leonard, what is it going to cost me to build this garage? He said, $2,500. Went to the bank and said, I need $2,500 to build a garage. They gave me, I still haven't signed a form for the $2,500. It was so easy at that time.
Exactly.
So Highland Hoagland would say, it looks good to you, and...
Yeah, that was the way it was handled. He said, sure, okay, and that was it. He didn't even know the individuals.
He didn't have to, he knew you.
No, that was the way it worked.
And I bet he never lost a penny.
I don't think he did. I don't think he ever had a bad one.
No.
I don't think he ever had a bad one, no.
Then this became a very large business. The Akron Savings and Loan became a very large business for you people. And,
yeah. Well, in fact, Dad then got on the board. He was on the board of directors for a number of years.
Then you started building a little house here and a little house there, and the next thing you know, you had an allotment. What was the first allotment that you built?
I would guess Westgate, working closely with Owen Ringer. He had the Ringer food locker, and then that land south of him.
Now,
and
Owen Ringer came here in the early 40s. Is that correct?
I'm really not sure about that. All I recall is he had the market there, and we became closely associated.
And he had Elsie Ringer. Who's Elsie Ringer?
Wasn't that a sister, I believe? She's since is dead. I think she worked there.
Right. And the food locker, you know, that's something that does not even exist anymore.
No.
Tell us about food lockers, not that necessarily has anything to do with Fixlers, but tell us about food lockers and what was significant about them.
Well, I suppose I would guess it came as a part after thought of the Depression, because people would go out and buy a
side of beef,
store it and so forth, freeze it. There was Owens, and then
That was before
closest food market on Wetrusa. He had a
You had one of those. There was Ringer's on down on College Street and Close's on Wetrusa.
I don't remember another one. Was there any other?
I don't think there was another one.
The two.
But those two predated the home freezers. Is that correct?
I would guess so.
Right. And people would put these, and then you would pay so much a year. Wasn't very
for the
much.
space is
$10, $15. You have a spot in there, and then you had a key, and you would go in and take it out. It was always very, very cold. Even in the summertime, it was very cold. It was hard to go into it, but it was the whole thing was frozen. That food locker was where?
Well, Close's was on Wetrusa.
I know, but I mean Ringer's. And what's at Ringer's right now?
Well, Bob Balt has his business in there.
In other words, the building is still there.
Really, Bob's added to it and done some remodeling.
And remodeled it
the basic
completely.
building is still there.
Now, you became involved with Owen Ringer, and what did Ringer have down there that you needed?
Well, he wanted to sell his land. We were negotiated with him. We handled the sale and development of the land.
In other words, he had land.
Interestingly, those lots sold, and we thought we were getting a pretty good price, from $900 to $1,200.
Right now. What do they sell for now?
Oh my goodness, you'd probably be considerably more than that.
$25,000, $35,000 easily.
Yeah, right.
What was that place like before you started putting your first house up?
It was an apple orchard.
Apple orchard. As a matter of fact, it was Ringer's apple orchard. And everyone knew it as Ringer's apple orchard. And it went down all the way into Holmesbrook Valley.
Didn't cross Treese Road.
No, it didn't cross. Oh,
No. We came to Treese Road. This side of Treese Road.
This side of Treese Road.
There was a
didn't go
development in
beyond
between there and Treese Road, which was Westview. And that was when Allen Hartzell opened up immediately after the war.
Okay.
And my dad helped develop that one, but that was Westview.
But then you had Ringer allotment.
Yeah.
Let's make that distinction once again. Tell us which one Allen Hartzell started and which one you started.
Well, okay, there's Treese Road, and then you're coming east, and you've got Westview. And Westview at that time, those lots were, I think, 100 by 200, no sewer. And at that time, they opened those out.
It was township at the time, wasn't it?
Right. And then we went just east of that to Ringer's development, and that we sewered that. We got sewer, city water, and the whole bit. So that was one of the more modern developments at that time. And that was it. They cut off. Then we went back of there. Then we bought the old Just farm back in
Herman Just.
Right.
Who had come from Germany.
Yeah.
Yes, Herman Just. And he was south of there, correct?
Yeah. We sold that farm to Herman originally, and then years back we bought it back.
You bought it back. But where was Herman living at the time? He was not living on Treese Road.
I think Herman came from, I don't know whether it's Norton or Barberton area. I'm not sure.
He came from the Norton area.
Yeah, I'm not too sure.
Much of his family still lives in Norton, but what I'm saying is that Herman's house was down where? Herman lived down there.
Well, it was on Treese Road.
On Treese
Road? The old
Road?
farmhouse, right.
Oh, it was on Treese Road then?
Yeah.
And you bought that property.
Yeah.
So now you had the Ringer orchard and you had the Herman Just farm.
Yeah, at a later date after Ringer's.
Later date. And then you developed all of that. What streets did you develop? What were the names of the streets starting from east to west?
Well, we extended Westwood for one. And
Westwood,
then Barronwood, we named Barronwood Rolling Hills Drive. And that's pretty much, there's three of them in that area. And then Rolling Hills Drive, we still have 25 or 26 acres out there that will go on and continue and tie into Treese Road again.
Eventually.
That's
what you're planning to do. And what did we call that allotment?
Rolling Hills.
Rolling Hills. There's a curiosity on the part of many people of how you name streets and how you name allotments. So how did you name yours?
Well, I think Rolling Hills, we just had a discussion at the office. Well, what are we going to name this? You know, and somebody said, well, they're kind of a rolling land. You know, well, it's Rolling Hills. And then engineer would throw a name out once in a while or something. But we always had the idea that we didn't particularly want to name streets after individuals. I mean, this was kind of a trend years back that if you you were Owen Ringer and you owned that farm, then we'd name that Ringer Street. See, but we kind of got away from that. We tried to make them a little more attractive.
And some of the people had a bunch of girls in the family that would name it Julian, Jay, and Jillian, and whatever all of the children's names.
Down the line on
all the down the line. How did you come up with Barronwood? And
that was an engineer did that.
Engineer did
Yeah,
that.
he had it. He just had it printed in on the plat. So
Barren
okay,
wood.
let's leave it go that way.
B-A-R-R-E-N,
Yeah.
wood.
Mm-hmm.
It seems so strange because it is anything but barren,
Yeah, right.
and there's no woods down there but barren
True.
wood.
So,
And then what was the name of the other street that you?
well, Rolling Hills Drive, we
Hills
extended
Drive.
that, and then Westwood, of course, was already existing, and that just
So you
brought
just
that
went straight on
yeah.
south with that.
Yeah.
When do you remember the first person to buy a house in your allotment down there in the Rolling Hills?
I remember some of them. Tom Cox built into there.
First at the first.
One of the first. He was on Parkview.
Parkview, then he went down there, but then he moved up to.
Corny McGrew, Dr. McGrew built in there. But like you say, the first one, no, I can't come up with
Yeah,
that.
well, it's not that important because we're trying to get all of these things for historical evidence. Then this was good, therefore you wanted to do something else. Where did you go from there?
From there, I think we went out to Skycrest.
And tell us all about Skycrest and where that is juxtaposed with Sky Park.
All right, Skycrest is at the intersection of Mennonite Road and Seville Road. And one of our salesmen came in one day and said, this fellow wants to sell his farm over there. You want to buy it?
Remember who it was?
Dave Blotter was the one that brought the sale to us.
Dave Blotter was, but whose farm was it?
Collard, I think was their name. So okay, we'll pick that up. So then we sold half of it, I think, to Welsing's, the east half, and then we developed the hill portion where the views were and so forth.
Now, Welsing's, you're talking about Dan Welsing and
Dad's
Sky Park.
Dad's
Oh, Dad.
mother and dad.
Mother and father, you mean where they lived?
Right.
On the corner of Seville and Mennonite then?
Yeah, the east corner.
The east corner. And
Northeast
you
corner.
developed then what?
We developed the northwest corner.
The northwest corner. And what did you call that?
Skycrest.
Skycrest. And those homes there were not the same caliber of homes that you had in Rolling Hills, or what were they?
No, I think the normal trend is you were just increasing the valuations. You're getting a little more elaborate homes, a little larger and this type of thing.
When you first started building, did you think that you ever build homes that would cost $500,000?
No, because the first houses we built in High Point, when we opened that, we had 5 models, and we were offering them at $31,500.
$31,500.
And I know my dad said, my golly, he said, will we ever sell these at $31,500?
How much would they go for today?
Oh, those are 150, 170.
Now, when did you mentioned High Point.
Excuse me.
Did High Point precede these, or was they after?
No, that was, we went into Skycrest, then we bought some land, Malon. We developed the Malon, that short street in
Now,
there.
tell us what Malon looked like before you developed it.
Just fields, weeds, barren,
Weeds.
nothing.
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 It was behind Centralized School.
Right.
And when I was going to Centralized School, we played on that big field there, but we were never permitted to go beyond the fence because it was so treacherous back there. They had big, tall weeds, and of course, the older kids told us that there were 16-foot snakes in there.
I would imagine.
Oh, just anything at all. And no one ever went. I mean, it was the best barrier you've ever seen for these older kids to say to the little first graders and second graders that there are 16-foot snakes in there, and how long is 16 feet? And they would say, well, from here to there, and they'll eat you up, and all. Oh, my heavens. But it was a desolate field. There was not anything
just
back there.
Completely nothing, right?
So when you developed Malon, what was it like, and what did you do, and how did you conceive of this desolate area that has 16-foot snakes in it? How did you conceive of that as being a beautiful place that it is now?
Well, I think you look at it on the basis of what can you do with the land? What can you do? What's its possibilities? It was close to the schools, which is good. It was a fairly good level lying piece
nice.
of ground.
Oh, surely, yeah.
We had access to the sewer and the water, the city utilities, which is, I think, vital.
And then to the north, you had that beautiful Fixler Woods.
Well, that would be up further north.
Yeah, further north, yeah.
Went into Roslyn. But That's pretty much it. We're constantly on the lookout for fairly nice land to develop that would have.
Now,
all
Maylon
the-
was not a very long street.
No, no.
And you have about 20 houses there, 20?
I would say there's more than that. I think.
More than 20?
I think there are, Caesar. I can't recall.
But you
exactly.
developed that. Then from there you went to where? To High Point?
Well, yeah, I guess we did. We had an opportunity to, the Wookter farm and the Tucker farms were together, and we bought both of those. And
Were there some
High
problems?
problems?
Yeah.
Oh, mostly in getting through it.
Yeah.
That's why we named Tanglewood Tanglewood. You couldn't begin to walk through that place. That was just solid, massive brush and shrub. And
Absolutely. You could not walk through it. That was the big problem. The Tucker farm and the Wookter farm
Wookter, right.
were both there, but both of them had quit farming when?
Oh, way before my time, I think.
But before, my understanding is that those were just beautiful, beautiful farms at one time.
Oh yeah, they were beautiful. Apple, they had a lot of apples.
Oh, a lot of
that type
apple orchards,
thing.
and the brambles and the briars came up, and as you say, Tanglewood was nothing but.
You couldn't
And
begin to
now
walk
there,
through
you
it.
probably did have 16-foot snakes.
It could be. The
they
biggest
were-
thing we had was rock. We had coming in from Oak Street to Tanglewood was rock, and at that time, couldn't do it now. We had
Blow it.
we had to blast it out.
Blast it out. You can't not allow permit to do it now, of course. Now, when you started building that, my recollection, see if I'm right on this, people wanted to build their own houses, and the only way that they could build them is if they build them through you. Is that right?
Yeah, we thought we could control the styling a little bit, keep the values up, which it did work. I mean,
You bet it did. You bet it did. So then you did Tanglewood, High Point, and a couple of...
Part of Forest Lane, Trails End. That's all tied in together.
All tied in. And what about that one that goes on, I can't think of the name of it, but it goes in a horseshoe.
Oh, Windfall.
Windfall Lane.
That was named because of the apples, Windfall apples.
That's right. That's the name there. So Tanglewood because of the fact that everything was tangled up. Windfall because of the windfall apple.
Forest Lane because that was into the dense, heavy
into the end of the
trees.
forest there. But tell us how you got High Point.
Well, we drove up there naturally, and we looked, well, this looks like one of the highest points in town.
And it is.
And it would be a natural. And the street came in right at the crest of the hill.
Right.
So we felt
Call
this
it
was a
High
natural.
Point.
Yeah.
It relates to what we were talking about a little while ago, how we get names. Now, when you first started building that, there were some older houses on Broad Street, one particularly, and then you finally tore it down.
Oh, that was the old Tucker house.
That's what I wanted to hear you talk about. Tell us about the old Tucker house, and of course, you know, one of the things that the Wadsworth Area Historical Society likes to do is to preserve the ambiance that was once Wadsworth, and had we been in operation at that time, we probably would have stood up there and cried or something if you would have torn that house down.
I understand that president or something like that had
Yes.
stayed there years back.
That is correct.
And I felt, well, but we were under pressure at that time. The neighborhood wanted it out of there.
Oh boy, did they want it out of there! But it was a beautiful home as far as I was
Wasn't
concerned.
bad at
It's
all, really.
Beautiful. That could have been made into a beautiful historical site, but it was torn down. And now you have a nice house on there too. It's
Right,
a very, very nice house. But that was a beautiful old home, and the neighbors wanted it torn down. What about as you went north? What kinds of topographical problems did you find that you weren't really expecting? Or
I don't think we had anything like that, Caesar. Our biggest problem was maybe the rock coming in on Oak Street and
the rock?
yeah.
And maybe it was
Tanglewood, but
Allen
not-
Drive that had the.
Yeah, we had great drainage.
You had great, but didn't Allen have some problems with the drainage?
Well, they were down the lower part there. They were getting that water, I think, from
The spring.
well, the north end of town and through there, and
But you had good drainage
we had
because you were at
good,
the top
excellent.
and so forth.
We
Now,
have had no problems
somewhere
that
along
way.
the line, was there not a 17-acre landlock in there that you finally bought, or my recollection bad on this one? A piece of ground that either Grace Kuntz or Martha Hinkle owned that was landlocked in there. Does that ring a bell?
No, the only thing that maybe you're thinking about, we developed a forced lane, okay?
Right.
We brought High Point down and stubbed it off. And then we owned that land in between.
Ah.
Okay, and that was, we just, not deliberately set on, we just didn't feel like we wanted to move into it right now. So then there was that portion of Far Avenue that could have been extended.
Couldn't be extended.
And the extension of High Point, which we've now finished.
It is now finished.
Yeah, so that might be what you're thinking of.
Now, do you have the houses on Far Avenue from Hartman Road to High Point?
No, we have the houses from High Point, well, we go down Far to High Point, and then we stop. And then High Point East goes on beyond that. We negotiated the sale of that. We did open portions of that years back, the west or the south end.
Tom, if you had enough fingers, how many would you need to count the numbers of houses that Fixler Agency has built?
I have no idea.
Well over 200?
Yeah, because we didn't we practically handled all the sales of Wolf Avenue and Euclid and the Tolbert Street area years back too, but we handled that through a brokerage setup. But we were instrumental in building those to some extent, yeah.
Thousands of them. We're going to come back to that in a minute, but we forgot to get some of the information from you about the love of your life. Who was that?
Well, she was a schoolgirl in Wadsworth High, and we met, of course, in high school.
What was her name?
Vida Jo Beck.
Beck.
Now, her family was...
Did you ever forget her name?
Her family were the Treese. In fact, Treese Road was named
Treese Road
after
is
their
after
family. That was
her grandparents.
Right. No.
And Vida Jo lived where?
She lived on River Styx Road, 49. They had a nice big farm out there.
Now, excuse me, the Beck family is a large Germanic family.
Yeah.
And probably, 3 or 4 generations here.
Yeah, I think if you go back
many.
through the Guilford areas, that they go back quite a ways.
Now,
right?
where did Vida Jo go to elementary school, and when did you meet her?
Well, she went to Isham.
She went to Isham, went to Central High School.
And then I think we must have met.
In the 10th grade.
Yeah, I think you're right.
10th grade, right. So, and you went with her during high school, too, didn't you?
All through high school.
And she was your high school sweetheart, and then she waited for you when you went to the
Coast Guard.
Coast Guard, and was there, and you got married, 1943 or 4, somewhere?
46.
46.
I had to come home from overseas and had a 30-day leave. I was at Ellis Island. That's where they brought us in. So I came home for 30 days. We got married. I went back to Ellis Island. They moved us on to Philadelphia, and I was discharged maybe 60 days later from in Philadelphia.
And Vida Jo has brothers and sisters in Wadsworth.
Sisters only.
No brothers? That's right. No sisters. Who are her sisters?
Well, there were Thelma, which was the oldest. Then there was Hazel Whitlam, Jack Whitlam.
Yes.
And there was Doris and Doreen, twins, and then Phyllis. And then there was one sister, I think, that died when they were quite young.
And Vida Jo is your age almost, but she's a year younger, isn't she?
No, she's 3 months older than I am. I have to tell her that every once in a while. Yeah, I married an old lady.
You married an older woman, that's right.
Yes, sir.
We can get some telephone calls tonight on that one. They'll be from Vida Jo.
Did I commit a boo-boo there?
I'm afraid you did. You can't say those things.
I'm sorry. Whoever.
No problem. How about kids? I have some. One of your daughters is a very popular person and has had a tremendous amount of success as a Girl Scout person, hasn't she? Tell us about
correct.
her.
Well, Sarah, in fact, started as a Brownie, and apparently from that point on, it was just strictly Girl Scouts. She went to all the camps and so forth, went on to Radford University in Virginia, and majored in recreation and I think psychology, something like that.
And that would have been in the 50s.
Yeah, I graduated from Radford, and through that year, I have to compliment the girl because she never cost me anything. Every summer, she had a job. She worked as a camp director for a Girl Scouts or counselors or something of that nature. And when she was graduated, she was hired by the state of Delaware as a Girl Scout. She progressed up to the assistant director for the state of Delaware.
My daughter lives in Delaware right now, and your daughter's name is still associated.
Is that right?
There. You bet.
Wonderful. And then she went from there. She had an opportunity, and in Vermont, so they hired her as executive director in the state of Vermont. And she worked there, I think, 4 or 5 years. Surprisingly enough, she is semi-retired.
Your child is semi-retired and she's not even 50 years old yet.
No, she works now, though. She moved to Oregon. She took a job with, I don't know, maybe you know it's unique, I think, in the States, but Oregon Food Bank. And she working for them, and it's a matter of getting food and funds
For the poor.
and money, right? So she's got a pretty nice little
The
job
Akron
there.
Food Bank had recently just had the dinner in which all of the restaurants provide food, and then that's their fall venture that brings attention to the food bank. It's a tremendous feeling of giving that the people in the food bank, and your daughter has done just absolutely marvelously. Vida Jo does what? Now, you're in charge. You're in charge of Fixler Agency, but does she tell you what to do?
Well, when I enter the front door at the house.
Front door of the house. But she never worked with you, did
she did for a couple of years.
Did she? Many years ago?
Just to help out a little bit, but no, she's been a homemaker.
You've kept home and business somewhat separate.
Yes.
And you've always had a very good sense of humor, the two of you. Everyone knows you, and everyone knows her. Of course, she was a very popular girl in high school, as you probably remember. She was popular enough to get you, or to get your attention.
Vice versa.
And the other thing that I think that is particularly significant is that Vida Jo probably could have been, what would we say here, a very powerful influence in Wadsworth. She elected not to do anything like that. She pretty well...
Yeah, she stayed married, became a homemaker, and pretty much content with just doing a good job at that.
She did a darn good job of that. Tell us about some of the first people you worked with in the agency. Who were they? Who were the salespeople? Who were the office people? And those people, you still have a couple of them still walking around there, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't that right?
Well, you're going way back. I had a cousin who worked with us, Dick Yockey. I don't remember Dick.
Dick Yockey lived up on the hill in Holmesbrook Hill.
And, oh boy.
Now tell us how Dick Yockey, incidentally, is Y-A-C-K-E-E.
Right.
Richard Yockey, how is he related?
Dick is a cousin.
How though?
His mother was my mother's sister.
Right.
Younger sister. And Dick, and then there was his brother Bob. You probably knew him.
Oh, I know all the Yockeys, right? Knew where they lived, and they, as you come out of Old 57 or Wadsworth Road now,
they lived in that old farmhouse straight up on the hill. So, but going back to some of the people that work for us, Caesar, boy, it's, I almost draw a blank on that anymore. And that's,
well, how about the office secretaries and people like that? You remember some of those people who worked with you there? Who's working with you right now? Rosemary is working.
Peggy Lopresti.
Peggy, Rosemary's your sister-in-law.
With us 25 years.
Yeah.
And but prior to that, I had a real good gal. She was I think she had been, valedictorian of one of the, not Cloverleaf, but Lodi or something. It's Ruth Braley.
Yes.
Excellent girl. She worked for us for around 25 years.
And that was many years ago, too.
Many years. One of the first girls.
Yeah, so we're talking when you first started there, Ruth probably was one of the first people that worked with you.
She was one of the first one, because basically it was Dad, my mother, and I. That pretty well stuck together on this thing.
Your mother was quite a powerful person, too, wasn't she?
She did all the bookkeeping and
yes,
and the accounting and so forth.
Now, here's a case where the vice president of the agency was permitted to make monetary decisions, but she would tell you whether to put your sweater on when you went outside.
She made a lot of good suggestions. She was a very capable gal.
Very capable
I'm telling you, between my dad and my mother, I tell a lot of people, they were my best friends.
They were. And
that's which is unusual, I think, in a lot
many years ago in the early 40s, mid-40s, I worked at the B&B store, and your dad was working right next door at Helen Hartzell.
Yeah.
And he would come in on a very regular basis, and I talked with him and chatted with him and so forth. Never saw him down, never saw him anything but up.
Yeah.
He was always that way. He and Bernie Coleman,
Bannard Coleman, yeah.
They were two opposite people. I mean, Bannard was always kind of reserved.
And very precise.
Yes, precise.
An excellent well, bookkeeper.
Right.
He was very good.
And your father was...
he was an extrovert.
Extrovert of the first
Dad
water.
was an extrovert.
Never met a stranger, and all that kind of thing. Your mother wasn't working at that time. She became involved with the agency probably when you opened your own agency.
Really, when we started,
when you opened
right?
your own. And before that, she really was not too terribly involved with the city of Wadsworth. Is that correct?
Well, she used to, as a kid, she worked at the old Banner Press for Nellie Harder.
No, did she?
My mother was a typesetter. She had a trade.
She had a trade.
Yeah.
Isn't that something? Do you remember any of the stories about the old Banner Press?
Oh yeah, I used to go up there as a kid with.
And what do you remember about it?
Well, I know the night before the paper, they'd work all night long, and of course at that time we didn't feel too affluent, so we would leave the car in the garage, and he and I'd go up about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. We'd walk up College Street, pick up my mother at the old Banner Press at that time.
Which was on the corner of the alley,
right
next to the present Marathon Station on Broad Street, and just 2 doors up from the Star Strand Theater. And right next door to the saloon.
But anyway, we'd go up and bring her back, walk her home at that time in the morning because it was late early, and we felt more comfortable.
Surely,
so,
absolutely.
But
she was a typesetter. And we no longer have typesetters.
No.
Because it's all done with computer. But at one time, they would actually have fonts, F-O-N-T-S, and these fonts would be in a certain place, and the people...
In a case. You used to have a case, and she'd pick out the letters and set...
Without even looking, just like a typist, and you just pick out
the ad.
And she would know the capital letters, where they would be, and all of that, and the fonts had these little compartments in them. And then they did it all day long. And then, as soon as the paper was printed, they would break the fonts. Yeah. And they would put those letters right back in the same identical spot.
Right.
However, then they started with linotype machines. Yeah. And the linotype machines...
Go to the linotype and they'd make those out, right?
But your mother was a typesetter. Yeah. And that was the way that newspapers were printed. Right. And the Banner Press, of course, became became joined with the Wadsworth News. So then it became the Wadsworth News Banner. Right. And then later on became the Sun Banner Times when the Sun newspapers brought it. We have only a couple minutes left, believe it or not. It takes these hours go so very fast. And I want to get to one very important thing. You're 75 years old. You look like a movie star of about 45 to 50 years of age.
You and I could be friends for life.
We could be friends for life. And you have the energy of a 55 or 45 or 50-year-old man.
I've been blessed, thank goodness.
And yes, you've been blessed. We've all, if we wake up in the morning, we say thanks, because that's what it is anymore. And there doesn't seem to be a hint in your eyes nor in your demeanor of ever retiring. What's next?
Well, I think as far as retiring, of course, this is brought up a lot of times, but I look at it as long as I'm having fun. I enjoy it. I enjoy going to work. I enjoy what I'm doing, and as long as this is going on, and why bother?
Exactly the way I feel. I just finished my 48th year in education not too terribly long ago. On June 7th, I ended my 48th year. I started teaching actually before I graduated from college because we didn't have teachers, and I started teaching on a part-time basis. So 48 years ago, when I awakened on the last day that I taught this past year, and I'm still teaching, but the last day that I taught this year, I was as excited about going to school that morning as I was the first day 48 years ago. So, to me, it's just the most joyful thing to be able to do this. And so long as I have the health, and so long as you have the health. And the only difference here is that if I go to school, all I do is go to school and maybe make an impression on some student, but you never know.
You can help.
And you never know and ever know. But when you make an impression, we see the house for 100 years. Are you going to build any more?
Oh yeah, we'll probably be putsying along.
You're putsying along. I like you've been putsying along.
But I can't remember when you mentioned going back to education. I can't recall, and I'm sure there must have been a day that I regretted going to work.
That's the thing that has been the most beautiful secret. And I would imagine it came from your dad, who was always up. Never saw him any other way. Tom Fixler, you've been so kind to give us all of this, and it's been a delight to have you, and you are a delight. And as we look at all of these houses, down at Ringer Allotment, Skycrest, and Barronwood, Rolling Hills, and High Point, and Tanglewood, and all of those. We will think of the legacy that you have left Wadsworth, and we are grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Enjoyed it.